What if the greatest war described in ancient Indian literature was not simply a battle between good and evil? What if it was also a study of political ambition, diplomatic strategy, psychological warfare, and the tragic consequences of human decisions? When we look closely at the Mahabharata, especially the Shanti Parva, Drona Parva, and Udyoga Parva, the epic begins to reveal a very different dimension. The Mahabharata is often reduced to a simple battle between Dharma and Adharma. The grand epic where everything appears black and white. But if someone turns the pages of the Shanti Parva, Drona Parva, or Udyoga Parva published by Gita Press, the text no longer remains just a story. It begins to look like a detailed and often unsparing manual of statecraft, military strategy, calculated warfare, and survival. And that is precisely the purpose of our deep study today, to understand that in ancient times, the struggle for power was not fought only between armies standing face to face on the battlefield. Behind it were psychological warfare, complex moral dilemmas, and diplomatic strategies that even today echo in the corridors of power. So, for those listening, this will truly be like a masterclass. And the greatest strength of these source materials is that they focus not merely on what happened, but on why it happened. That is the most essential part. When we go through these precise and authentic translations, one thing becomes very clear: the text does not blindly glorify any side. Whether Kaurav or Pandav, every strategic decision is examined logically, along with its motivations, compulsions, and consequences. Today we attempt to understand that same logic without taking sides, completely as neutral analysts. So let us begin with that logic. Where does war truly begin? This is the biggest question. When we read these texts carefully, it becomes evident that no king picks up weapons overnight. The seeds of war are sown long before, through greed and ambition. In the Van Parva, there is a very interesting section where Yudhishthira and others discuss anger. Yudhishthira clearly says that anger is the root of destruction. He explains that anger clouds judgment, destroys wisdom, and pushes even wise men toward ruin. He describes forgiveness as the greatest virtue of a ruler. But on the other side stood Duryodhana's blind ambition. And when the other side's ambition is blind, how far can forgiveness work? This is the eternal conflict between Dharma, the duty of a ruler, and personal ambition. A ruler's private ego can place the entire kingdom at stake. The finest example of this appears in the Udyoga Parva in the form of Vidura Niti. There, Mahatma Vidur repeatedly warns Dhritarashtra. He tells him clearly that a king's primary duty is to protect the interests of the state, not to fulfill the stubborn desires of his son, which Dhritarashtra was doing. Vidur explains in very clear words that due to attachment and greed, Dhritarashtra has stepped onto a path from which there is no return. As a father, attachment to one's son is understandable. But when destruction is visibly standing ahead, why does a ruler close his eyes? Because the intoxication of power blinds him. On the other side, Yudhishthira, after completing exile and incognito life, asked only for half his kingdom. Later, to preserve peace, he asked for just 5 villages. Only 5 villages. This shows that one side was ready to compromise even on its rightful claims to avoid conflict. And Duryodhana's refusal to give even land equal to the tip of a needle proves that when power intoxicates a person, appeals for peace are seen as weakness. When one side shuts every door of compromise, war becomes inevitable. But before war is formally declared, diplomacy takes center stage. And here things become truly fascinating. In the Shanti Parva, the principles of governance are no less than a diplomatic masterclass. The doctrine of Sam, Dama, Bheda, and Danda, is explained in depth. It is a very practical framework. The order of these four is extremely important. The sequence itself is their real strength. The texts advise that if destruction is to be avoided, one must begin with Sam, persuasion through dialogue, reasoning, and negotiation. After that comes Dama, offering economic or territorial concessions to reach settlement. Third comes Bheda, creating division within the opposing side, breaking alliances, or influencing loyalties. And only when all three fail does the final step appear, Danda, the use of force or punishment. In ancient Indian diplomacy, war was always the last option, never the first. At this point, another crucial dimension emerges. Even when war became inevitable, it was not meant to be lawless destruction. The Mahabharata repeatedly refers to the principles of Dharma Yudh, righteous warfare. There were clear codes. Battles were to begin at sunrise and end at sunset. A warrior without weapons was not to be attacked. One-on-one combat was to be respected. Non-combatants were not to be harmed. War had rules because Dharma was meant to remain superior even in violence. But as the days passed in Kurukshetra, we see those very codes collapsing. The first major shock came when Abhimanyu was surrounded and attacked by many warriors at once, even after he had been disarmed and left fighting almost alone. Bhishma was struck while Shikhandi stood before him. Dronacharya was broken through psychological strategy involving Ashwathama's name. Karna was killed when his chariot wheel was stuck. Each event forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. When fighting adharma, how far can one bend dharma? This moral erosion is one of the deepest tragedies of the epic. The greatest example of Sam was Shri Krishna going as a peace envoy to the Kaurav court. That episode is extremely powerful. When one reads the source carefully, it becomes clear that Shri Krishna did not go merely as a messenger. He laid out before Dhritarashtra, Duryodhana, and the entire assembly a complete blueprint of the consequences of war. He showed them a mirror of the future. He warned them that war would destroy entire generations of warriors and leave the land filled with widows and grief. He tried to involve elders like Bhishma and Dronacharya in the peace effort to create institutional pressure on Duryodhana. It was negotiation at the highest level. And during this process, Shri Krishna also subtly applied Bheda. After leaving the court, he met Karna privately. He revealed to him the secret of his birth, that he was Kunti's eldest son, something Karna himself did not know. Shri Krishna then offered him the entire empire if he joined the Pandavas. This was a direct attempt to shake the loyalty and morale of the enemy's strongest warrior. A form of psychological warfare. Although Karna did not abandon Duryodhana, that conversation created deep internal conflict within him. In diplomacy, creating doubt in the opposing side is often equal to half a victory. When both dialogue and strategic division failed, preparations for war began. And here alliance politics started. The sources describe this on a massive scale. Both sides began gathering armies. Kurukshetra had become not merely a battlefield, but a gathering of nearly the entire warrior civilization of Bharatvarsh. The Pandavas assembled 7 Akshohinis. The Kauravas had 11. One Akshohini consisted of 21,870 elephants, 21,870 chariots, 65,610 cavalry, and 109,350 infantry. So, 18 Akshohinis at Kurukshetra meant millions of warriors and animals gathered in one place. To gather such numbers required powerful foreign policy. The Shanti Parva describes 6 types of foreign policy known as Shadgunya Niti, Sandhi, Vigrah, Yan, Asan, Dvedibhav, and Samshray. Sandhi means making a treaty of peace, a deliberate decision to resolve conflict through agreement and mutual understanding rather than battle. Vigrah means open hostility or war, when diplomacy fails and the ruler chooses confrontation instead of reconciliation. Yan refers to marching out for a military campaign, the act of mobilizing forces and advancing toward the enemy with strategic intent. Asan means holding one's position patiently, neither attacking nor surrendering, but waiting carefully for the right moment when circumstances become favorable. Dvedibhav is the policy of dual approach, maintaining peace or alliance with one power while opposing another, balancing relationships to protect one's own interests. Samshray means seeking the support or protection of a stronger ruler, forming alliances that ensure survival and stability when facing a powerful adversary. These 6 principles formed a complete framework of statecraft. They guided how kingdoms formed alliances, chose their enemies, and decided when to fight or when to hold back. When we look at the alliances and strategies that unfolded before the Kurukshetra war, we can see these very principles quietly shaping the political landscape of the time. The episode of Shalya is a striking example of deception in alliance politics. Shalya, the maternal uncle of Nakul and Sahadev, was on his way to support the Pandavas. Duryodhan secretly arranged lavish hospitality along his route. Believing it was arranged by Yudhishthira, Shalya promised a boon to the organizer. Only then did Duryodhan reveal himself and claim the promise. Bound by his word, Shalya was forced to fight for the Kauravas. This shows that alliances are not always formed out of ideology. Sometimes they are shaped by compulsion, deception, or obligation. Then arises the question of loyalty. Bhishma and Dronacharya knew that the Kauravas were on the wrong path. They had witnessed Draupadi's humiliation. Yet they fought for Duryodhan. This was the paradox of duty. They were bound by their loyalty to the throne of Hastinapur and by vows taken long ago. Institutional loyalty overrode personal morality. Their psychological conflict shows how duty can force individuals into decisions that lead to destruction. When such complex loyalties and massive armies gathered at Kurukshetra, the military strategies that followed were astonishing. The texts discuss even the ideal month for war. Chaitra or Margashirsh were considered ideal months because crops were harvested, ensuring food supply. Weather was moderate, preserving soldiers' energy. Terrain was equally important. Chariots required flat, firm ground where their wheels would not sink. Elephants and infantry, however, could still operate even if the land became muddy. This shows that ancient warfare was not mere sword fighting. It involved geography, climate science, and logistics management. Then comes Vyuha formation. Makar Vyuha resembled a crocodile shape, designed to draw in and crush the enemy. Suchimukh Vyuha resembled the tip of a needle, used when numbers were fewer but precision was required to penetrate enemy lines. Elephants were positioned to break formations. Chariots attacked from secure positions. Cavalry guarded the flanks. But all this depended on one thing, a capable commander. The fall of a commander could create panic because he was the brain of the formation. Yet Drona Parva gives a horrifying picture of the battlefield. Severed torsos continuing to fight briefly even after being decapitated. Mountains of mutilated bodies of humans, horses, and elephants. Blood-soaked mud trapping chariots. The text does not romanticize war. It presents its brutal reality. When the war ended, there was no celebration. In Shanti Parva, Yudhishthira falls into deep depression. Though victorious, he feels defeated. He wants to renounce the world. Then Bhishma, lying on the bed of arrows, instructs him on Rajadharma. A ruler cannot indulge in personal grief. His duty begins after victory. As Bhishma explains in the Shanti Parva, the king exists for the welfare of the people, and when the people suffer, the king's responsibility becomes even greater. He must rebuild the shattered economy, care for widows and orphans, refill the treasury, and establish justice. To abandon the throne at such a moment would not be renunciation but escape. Rajadharma demands responsibility. After studying these authentic sources, one realization becomes very clear. Though thousands of years old, their essence is still alive. The psychology of power has not changed. The same diplomacy, the same ambition, the same alliance politics exist even today. These principles are rooted in deep understanding of human nature. When policies fail, the consequences are catastrophic. And yet, one final question lingers beyond politics and warfare. Was this war purely the result of human decisions? Or was it destiny unfolding through them? The Mahabharata constantly moves between these two dimensions. On one hand, every character makes choices. Dhritarashtra chooses silence, Duryodhana chooses pride, Karna chooses loyalty, Yudhishthira chooses patience. On the other hand, there were repeated hints that the burden of the earth had to be lightened, and that the war was part of a larger cosmic design. If destiny alone was responsible, then why are characters held accountable for their actions? And if everything was purely free will, then why do prophecies and divine interventions shape the course of events? The epic does not give a simple answer. It leaves us with reflection. Perhaps destiny provides the field, but human choice decides how the battle is fought. And perhaps the most haunting thought is this: when even the victorious side stands weeping on the ashes of its own loved ones, does victory truly exist? Or is victory merely a formal name given to the unbearable burden of survival? May this deep study awaken new questions in the minds of listeners and inspire them to explore further the wisdom hidden within these timeless texts. If you found this journey meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to Vibes of Divinity, and do share your reflections in the comments. Until then, inspire and stay inspired.